already dead.
Police arrived and unfortunately interviewed both Homolka and Bernardo together, so one was aware what the other one was saying. And at one point, a young uniformed officer had to stop Carla from trying to launder a blanket.
The signs of foul play are everywhere, but the coroner's office never runs a drug panel or checks for signs of rape. Instead, they write off Tammy's untimely death as an accident due to alcohol consumption.
Paul was pretty ticked at Carla for not being more careful, and he blamed her for messing up what was supposed to be his pleasure.
He began now to blackmail Homolka, saying, if you tell anybody what happened, I'm going to tell them that you did it.
But Paul and Carla quickly move on and use the murder for more exaggerated sex acts.
A couple weeks after Tammy's death, she dressed in Tammy's school uniform and pretended to be Tammy and spoke to Bernardo in a way that he demanded that she assume the role of her younger sister.
The relationship has reached a new level of depravity. So what better time to start planning a dream wedding?
She wanted a huge dress. It looks like the Disney princess. She wanted to ride away from the church in a carriage with a horse. She wanted pheasant under glass, which is an extraordinarily expensive thing to serve at your wedding.
With only a few months to go until the big day, the couple rents a house together.
Then he develops the fantasy to build a dungeon in his basement where he would keep abducted sex slaves and go younger and younger victims, searching for this elusive virgin victim who would satisfy his fantasy.
Now to find the perfect girl.
He was just wandering through backyards, and just by a pure chance, he sees Leslie Mahaffey.
I mean, Leslie Mahaffey was absolutely beautiful girl. I mean, from the inside out, just really upbeat, lots of fun, kind, sweet, generous, great kid.
A typical teenager, she's out past her curfew and has forgotten her house key.
So she sort of went into her backyard, and there's Bernardo. And he offers her a cigarette, and then he abducts her at knife point.
Bernardo gets his camera and goes crazy on Leslie, torturing her and raping her repeatedly. In between his sessions, he offers her some wine. Carla flips out. Paul is using the good crystal.
The bride-to-be knows her fiancé's kidnapped a young girl so that they can bind, torture, and rape her together. And she's mad because the victim's lips touched her crystal wine glasses. She's one demonic piece of work, and she's about to take that bizarre fury out on her victim.
Carla loses it, unleashing on the captive, assaulting and torturing her while Paul films and directs. More than 24 hours after Leslie was abducted, they've had their fill. But their plan changes when the blindfold slips and she sees their faces.
So with drugs left over from Tammy's death, they drugged Leslie Mahaffey, and when she was under the effects of the sedative, Bernardo strangled her.
After cleaning the crime scene, they stash the body in the basement. After all, Carla's parents are coming over for dinner, and they can't have a dead girl just lying around. Once the coast is clear, they orchestrate a gruesome plan for disposing of the teenager's body.
They cut Leslie up into pieces and decapitated her. And Bernardo mixed cement, and he immersed Leslie's limbs into blocks. His plan was to dump them in a nearby lake.
Carla helped him carry some of the concrete slabs to the nearby lake, and One of them was so heavy they couldn't get it in the water.
2 weeks later, it's their wedding day.
A very elaborate wedding. They had a horse and buggy. You look back on it now, it's almost incomprehensible. 2 weeks after you murder and dismember somebody, then you get married.
The day they were getting married in all that glamour, first some fishermen and then ultimately the police saw some of the cement encased limbs bobbing to the surface.
Dental records identify the body as Leslie Mahaffey. But there isn't a shred of evidence to tie the crime to the newlyweds, who are off on their honeymoon in Hawaii. Carla makes use of the video camera again, this time to profess her undying love to her new husband.
It was Carla talking about how she is just so happy and delighted that the marriage went off without a hitch and she's going to have the chance to spend the rest of her life with Paul. Well, I mean, they've just killed somebody. Chopped the woman up and put her in cement. And, oh, well, let's go to Hawaii and have a honeymoon. Still haunts me.
Now, freshly returned home from Hawaii, the happy newlyweds are looking for a wedding gift for themselves. Another victim. But it won't be long before wrath causes these living dolls to turn on one another. Newlyweds Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka are back from their honeymoon. With a renewed lust for blood and sex, they set their sights on 15-year-old Kristen French.
A remarkable, beautiful girl, very athletic, just sweet, sweet, sweet. You know, it would never hurt anybody.
She was walking home and she was passing by a church, and there's the car, and there's Carla. And she's got this map out, and she's trying to fold it open, and she's asking for help.
And then that's when Paul Bernardo came out of the car and shoved her in back.
It was Carla who kept the pressure on Kristen French's head, pulled her hair to make sure that she couldn't alert anybody that she was being kidnapped.
They take the girl home, roll video, and with all of Toronto searching for Kristen, brutally rape and torture her over the course of 3 days.
Obviously, she saw Carla, because Carla, waved her over to help her with the map directions. They had no choice. I mean, they had to kill her.
After choking the life out of her, they strip her naked and leave her in a dump in the woods.
Somebody was going through the trash to see if there's anything of value and came across the body and determined it was Kristen.
A young woman abducted, assaulted, and thrown away like trash. The public is panicked.
At least in my lifetime, nobody could recall something like this happening. Many of us just shut down. Many women I knew just stopped going anywhere.
But even the worst darkness comes to an end eventually. Soon, the two monsters are buckling under the pressure of what they've done. They turn on each other, with Carla getting the worst of it.
He was ultra paranoid he was going to get caught, and he just wasn't happy. And he started just getting more violent with her and blaming her for this, so he beat her violently. She had, like, raccoon eyes.
I suppose that was just the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back.
Carla moves out. Then, in January 1993, more than 2 years after his DNA sample is submitted for testing, Paul Bernardo is finally identified as the Scarborough rapist. Investigators put him under surveillance while they build their case. The first person they need to question is his estranged wife, Carla.
They interviewed her in relation to the Scarborough rape investigation. Certain questions that were posed to her caused her to believe that the net was closing in on the both of them.
Playing the role of the abused wife, Carla hires an attorney and makes a deal. She'll give them all the evidence they need to arrest Bernardo for the murders in exchange for leniency.
She said there were tapes, but she said she didn't know where they were. The government and the police moved forward thinking their only hope was to give her a deal so Bernardo would go away.
On February 17, 1993, investigators arrive at the couple's home with a search warrant. What they desperately want to find are those videotapes. Paul had hidden them in the ceiling, and while an investigator searches the exact hiding place, he doesn't reach quite far enough.
How could they miss it? There was just a lot of head shaking. They were very hardworking, diligent. They just missed it. You know, the long arm of the law. We called it the short arm of the law case.
Without that videotaped evidence, investigators don't realize the extent of Carla's involvement. So her attorney is able to negotiate a lenient 12-year sentence. Shortly after Carla finalizes her deal, Paul Bernardo's attorney finds the tapes and turns them over to authorities. They become the key evidence in the prosecution's case.
During the trial, while the videotapes were played to the jury, the TV monitors were turned away from the public so nobody saw them. But they could hear what was on the soundtrack.
It was very painful. I don't think any of us really wanted to be there at some point. A lot of the reporters were just, they were sick.
So much for Carla portraying herself as the abused wife.
When the public learned that Homolka had been so actively involved, not just in kidnapping and holding hostage these girls, but actually had sex with them and brutalized them and had two opportunities at minimum to let Kristen French go, the outrage has never ended in this country.
Seems the wife is as much of a predator as her husband.
You're looking into the whites of her eyes, and you saw the personification of evil. And they were kind of empty at the same time. That's exactly the look you see in her eyes in the videotapes.
It's that same demonic look that reporter Paula Todd sees when she tracks down Carla 12 years later after serving her prison sentence. She's now living in the Caribbean and is remarried with 3 children, free to live out her life in an island paradise.
How painfully ironic that the woman responsible for the death of her baby sister and 2 other children is now raising a trio of her own. She can tell herself she was a victim, spend the rest of her life playing tropical Barbie, but everyone knows she's a cold-blooded monster.
She's killed, she's raped, and she has eluded psychiatric diagnosis. I looked back at her and I thought, I know who you are. No matter what you try to do, I know who you are.
So now, Paul Bernardo is serving the life sentence for both of them.
If Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French could say something now to Paul Bernardo, I believe it would be rotten hell.
When we come back, everyone knows the big man around town, and God help you if you ever tell him no. The little town of Nixa, just outside Springfield, Missouri, is the kind of place where everyone knows each other. And one prominent family always has people talking. The Carnahans.
Garnett Carnahan.